Hello, BookTube. Surprise, surprise! I'm back with another top 10 list. I've these have been fun to do, and there's been other ones that have been suggested. And I go, oh, I like that. I didn't think of it. There'll be more of these. They're a good sort of thought experiment, I guess. But as I said in several replies to comments, that I've always, and I think I've verbally said this on some of the videos as well, I find it difficult to limit to 10 and impossible to go from 10 to one of the best. Sometimes there might be a one that's the best that sort of outshines all the others. But to rank the others in an actual order, not possible. And within a sort of top 10, I sort of figure that generally there'll be five of whatever it is that are not movable. Immovable? Immovable? Is that a word? There'll be five that will always be there. The other five or so, or even maybe less, are sort of floaters. They will ebb with the tide and, go back and forth. And it might be depending on what I'm reading at the time or what I've just read. And for this list, it's mostly to do with things that I plan on rereading next year. So they are in my mind. Well, they're all in my mind at the moment. But also, I might have had some discussion or seen some videos, and either in comments or through Voxer or things like that, that I've talked to people about these. The author or the series, so they're on my mind. So that's what we'll do it. And I'm not going to do any honorable mentions. I found it maybe a little too difficult to do even that. So we'll just confine to 10. And for the most part, I've read, other than two series that are on here, I've read everything of the series at least once, probably several times on a few occasions. The first one, though, I did not, and that's the La Comédie humaine. It's 91 works, but that includes short stories, novels, and essays. I've never actually looked up. All I know is like there's 90, 91 things. And I don't know how many novels, how many short stories, and how many essays are sort of a part of this, to be exact. I know I've read about 30 books, but that will include 30 or so books. That'll include some short stories of his. So I know that I like the series, and I'd love to read it all. I'd love to have a complete series. I don't have a complete edition, and it was noted before that it like say Jules Verne, it needs a new translations for this. Because there are, it was pointed, I was thinking, well, it's probably the newest ones are the Penguin translations, but we're getting probably back to like decades and decades since that's been done, maybe even over 50 years for a few, and they haven't done them all. It's not a complete Comédie humaine either. And then it was pointed out to me by Claire in the comments that there's some newer ones done by the Oxford World Classics. And and I forgot about that. But so there's a combination of those, but I don't think there's sort of full modern translations, modern in the sense of, say, within the last 30 to 50 years of the complete series. And if somebody knows it, then please let me know down below in the comments. But so there's 91 works. Honoré de Balzac lived from 1799 to 1850. And he started writing these about, the date I had to look up was 1829 and finished in 1948. No, 1848. Ay. Let me change that, because I'll be copy and pasting this in. Okay, so 1829 to 1848. Now, what I understand, there's 50 or more, either fragments or outlines or even just titles of other books that he had planned for this series but never ever got to. And I wonder, just as I said that, I wonder if there's a history of the comedy humaine, and talking about what he left behind. That would be fascinating. Again, if anybody knows that, please let me know in the comments. Enough about Balzac now. The second one is, these are, I usually put them in order of birth date of the author, but this is sort of the birth date of the first of the series. And the next one is, I do apologize before I even attempt the pronunciation, Rougon-Macquart series of books by Émile Zola. There are 20 books that were written between 1879 and 1893. Zola lived from 1840 to 1892, so I take it then at least the last book was written posthumously. And they were written out of order. He is given a list of the order to read them in, chronologically internal story. And I just had on my, favorite authors one, somebody posted a comment, which is fabulous. They're saying that they enjoy. Oh no, that was on my rereading. That they reread, but they reread in different orders. So they will read it in chronological order, and then another time they'll read it in the published order. And I go, wow, yeah, I never. It's a simple thing, but I just never thought about it. When I go to a series, I usually read it in the order that was published. The order, the internal order. But I do read through some authors, and I do read chronologically through them. But generally they don't have sort of series. And if I come to a series like that, it might cause me a bit of problem of decision of what to do. But knowing that I can do both is kind of interesting. But anyway, it is another series that I have not read every single book of the 20. I must have read near 10 Émile Zola books, and I know I've read a number of these. Enough to know that I don't think there'll be a bad book in the lot. And there are a lot of films that were adapted from these stories as well, even Hollywood films that you wouldn't even think of. But this is something that the reason why it's on, it's not the sole reason why it's on the list, but it's come to mind because I've been thinking about this for months and months about reading it through next year. And I do plan on doing that. I have a lot of plans, but I'm hoping I can keep to at least some of them, and this is one I hope to. So let's move on. 3 is, as I say, no order here other than when it was first, when they were first published. The Sherlock Holmes series, which is a lot smaller, 4 novels and 56 stories. Started in 1887 and he finished in 1827. No, I did it backwards now. I'm sorry. 1887 began and 1927 finished. And that's Sir Arthur Ignatius Conan Doyle. Ignatius. Better known as Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. He lived from 1859 to 1930. And I've read them through. It's a funny story with this. There were 2 authors that I was rationing. And, I should say the series, author and then the series. The Sherlock Holmes I was rationing. When I first came to England, I didn't have many books, so I went to the library and they didn't have hardly anything I wanted on the shelf. A couple things, at least here in this, where I am now, in the town I am now. And you had to pay for interlibrary loans, and they had something in there, sort of, I think they call it reserve stock, but it was at a different location, and you had to pay to get this. So it was £3. So there was 2 volumes. There was the complete novels and then the complete short stories. So I figured, okay, I'll get that, because I felt like reading some Sherlock Holmes. But I wound up reading them cover to cover, both volumes. So I've destroyed now. I'll never have a new, I don't think, Sherlock Holmes story to read. The other author is Edgar Allan Poe, and so far I've succeeded in 40 years of not reading everything. I'm rationing him. But yeah, so, and I've reread almost every story at various times, but I've never done a systematic read through from beginning to end consistently. Never done that, which could be interesting to do because I've done it once, and but even like half of it I had read in the past. But yeah, so that's another possibility to do. The next one is a little larger one, and again, this is on my mind because it's part of the August of Adventures we're doing, at least the first book of it, and the writer's been bandied around quite a bit recently on book two. Well, the author. I'll start with the author first. Is Edgar Rice Burroughs. He lived from 1875 to 1950, and the book series is Tarzan. It was started in 1912, and there were sort of book ones collection. The last one was about 1965, 66, but there's a few others. So there's 24 books that are sort of considered part of the Tarzan series, but there were outlines that were left by him, and so other people have done a few things authorized, and I think maybe another collection of either short stories were added. So the exact number is a little odd, but I have read it completely through at least once, and I've read spot ones over the years. It is something I'd love to reread again, but that's because it's around, it's on my mind. The next one also is Edgar Rice Burroughs. It's the Barsoom books, John Carter of Mars. Sorry, just got an email coming in. 11 books, started in 1912 as well, and again, a posthumous one around 1965, the 11th one, I think, short story. So, and that's the thing, I'm not saying novels on these because there are collections of short stories, and the same as Tarzan, there are collections of short stories, and not all novels. But yeah, that's another one that, because it's been for the last couple of years, it's been around, that I'd like to reread it. So let's move on. Where are we at now? We're at the fifth one, I think. Oh, wait a minute. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, 6. So we're getting there. 6 is Jeeves and Wooster series. Now this is going to be a little difficult to pin down how many books and so forth. Now that it was written by Sir Pelham Grenville Wodehouse, P.G. Wodehouse. Lived from 1881 to 1975, and he's on my favorite author list. No problem. Now, even to say how many books that there are, because there's short stories that are in, like maybe one story in a collection of short stories, or 3 or 4 in another story. So I'm just jumping out and saying that there's about 13 or 14 books. There's novels as well as short stories mixed up throughout, and I've read these at least twice, and I dip back into them every so often as well. Just fabulous, and there's been movies made, there's radio series that have been made that are fabulous. The best, I guess, TV series is Stephen Fry and Hugh Laurie that was done for. I think it was Thames Television. I don't know if it was BBC or Thames Television. Anyway, it was done here in the UK. They were sort of miscast because of their age, but just brilliant even so. And there wasn't enough of them. That's the thing. But yeah, I think the first short story appeared in 1917, and the last novel, Ants Aren't Gentlemen. I should have looked this up, but even if I didn't write it down, I would have forgotten. But yeah, 1974 was the last one, and he died. He was actually part way. He was working on his final book, which is the Blandings, another Blandings novel. He was working on that the day he died in the morning. Here we go. The next one is In Search of Lost Time, or however you want to title it in English. I've never read it in the sense of having 7 different books. I've read it once through, and I've started various other times. But there's apparently 7 books. But I've never had them sort of separately, so I haven't done that. They're usually in omnibuses. Like, I think I've got, currently I have three, I think it is three Penguin editions in a slipcase. A little rough, but they're okay. And they started in 1913 and ended in 1927. And that was the French, and then the English translation was 1922 to 1931. And the translation I've read is the Moncrief, Scott Moncrief or Moncrief Scott, whichever it is. Translation. There are some newer ones, and there's an annotated one that somebody's going through and annotating, which would be fabulous. But Marcel Proust lived from 1871 to 1922. So again, I don't know all the history of this. I've never really read into it much. I don't think I've read a biography of him, but he obviously 1927. So several must have, or at least one was published posthumously. So yeah, and I just love it. I love it, and I definitely want to reread it again. And that's been on my mind as well. But I think that wouldn't move from at least 5 here. Next one is Strangers and Brothers, 11 books, started in 1940 to 1970. By C.P. Snow. I think it's Charles Charles Percy Snow. Something like that. 1905 to 1980. I've basically read everything by C.P. Snow that I could lay my hands on, other than if he wrote some technical, like chemistry papers. I've not read those. But I'd love to get a collection of letters of his, or diaries, or, if he's probably written other essays and things like that have never been collected, which would be nice. But yeah, there's 11 books, and it goes from about the teens up to 1970. It follows basically one character, Lewis Elliot, and his sort of rise in society and rise in various jobs. And it sort of is a good chronicle of that period of British history and society, albeit a sort of certain level of culture and society. But even so, it's amazing. I've read it at least 3 times. I don't think on the 4th time I completed it for various reasons. That is another reread for next year. Now we go to some science fiction. The first one is Dune. Frank Herbert wrote that, and he lived from 1920 to 1986. Now, I am just talking about the original Dune series that he wrote. 6 books. I think the first Dune book was published in book form in 1966, but it was in magazine Analog in 1965. And the last one, Chapter House Dune, was published in 1985. There's not much to be said about this. More to say, it's people have talked about it. There's been a few 3 adaptations, a terrible one, and a good TV series, and I haven't seen the new one, or the first part of it. It's just sprawling. It's sprawling in ideas and time, and takes in so much stuff. Very political. There's no sense going into it. Everybody knows Dune, even if you haven't read it. You know Dune. The next one is Hyperion Cantos. It's 4 books, 4 novels. Well, see, I won't even say 4 novels, because the first 2 books are meant to be 1 novel. But 4 books and 1 short story so far, because the author, Dan Simmons, is still alive. He was born in 1948. It's doubtful he'll ever return to the Hyperion Cantos, but you never know. And I've read some of the there's 2 or 3 short stories that he wrote that were sort of ideas in for Hyperion Cantos before the Hyperion was written. So I've read those, but that's all I've read of this author. But it's so much, and I kick myself because I do have to read more Dan Simmons, because this Hyperion Cantos is amazing. I've read it 4 times, and I will be 4.5 times, because I read the first 2 again. Was it earlier this year or last year? I can't remember now. But it is sprawling. It is deceivingly simple. It's frameworked with space opera, and if that's all you want to enjoy it and read, there you go. It's space opera, and you can enjoy the story that way. But if you look a little deeper, there are multiple levels with this story to do with religion, philosophy, cultural, anthropological, poetry. Um, it's all there. With technology in sort of convergence with people and how that affects them, and yeah, it is very, very complex book if you want to look for that. And I always contrast this with Dune. Dune is right there, and there is complex issues immediately. He doesn't put it in a framework of simplicity and have this all the other stuff in there. It is, it's in your face, the depth of it for Dune. But Hyperion Cantos, like I say, you can read it in many ways, and that's why it's so good. Anyway, that's my top 10 favorite book series, or as the title will say, best ever. Hey, if I can't use clickbait, then there's something wrong with the world. Anyway, thank you, BookTube, and putting up for these. And yeah, do suggest any other 10 top 10s. I'd consider them for sure. I'm actually enjoying doing these. I never thought I would. I'm going, there's so many top 10 things. But it's fun. It's fun. I hope you enjoy them. And yeah, do comment. Are any of my top 10 series, favorite series on your list? Yeah, I'd love to hear. Take care, BookTube.